Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the online information training, Introduction to the Federal Enhanced Tribal Identification Card Program. This webinar is intended for tribes interested in establishing their own tribal identification protocol. This webinar is hosted by the Administration for Native Americans. A little bit about ANA. ANA strives to promote self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects and training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. We have 6 grant programs under ANA available to Native communities. ANA's vision is that Native communities are thriving. A little bit about the regional training and technical assistance centers across the nation. Today's webinar is hosted by the Alaska region. The Alaska region's Training and Technical Assistance Center. My name is Drina McIntyre, and I'm the training manager for the Alaska region. We're glad that you could join us today to learn about this opportunity. As well are the other training and technical assistance centers across the country, Pacific region, Eastern region, Western region, and Sister Sky assists our language programs. ANA's training and technical assistance centers offer free training, technical assistance, webinars, and useful tools and guides to assist you in preparing applications to ANA. Today, you will learn details about what the Enhanced Tribal Identification Card Program is, including its purpose, eligibility requirements, and who to contact for more information. Our guest presenters are Stephanie Marino and Shanti Gomez with the Enhanced Tribal Card Program from the Pascua Yaqui Tribe of Southern Arizona. The goals of today's webinar are to understand what Enhanced Tribal Identification Card Program is, to know who to contact about the Enhanced Tribal Identification Card Program, and what the general requirements of the Enhanced Tribal Identification Program are. At this time, I'd like to introduce our guest presenters. Stephanie Marino and Shanti Gomez are both members of the Pascua Yaqui Tribe and are currently positioned as Enhanced Tribal Card Program Marketing Coordinators for Sacred Path, a consulting service of the Pascua Yaqui Tribe. Together, they have a combined 8 years experience with this program, and they travel to conferences throughout Indian country to educate on the benefits of an ETC card. Welcome, Stephanie and Shanti.
Okay, sounds like everybody can hear me. Thank you, Drina, for that presentation. I really appreciate that on behalf of the Pascua Yaqui Tribe. I'll begin the presentation now. Good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing well today and staying safe. And on behalf of the Pascua Yaqui Tribe and Sacred Path, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our presentation on ETC cards. Again, a special thanks to the Alaska Region Training and Technical Assistance Center for inviting us to participate and share our experience and knowledge on this program. We'll be providing the slides after the webinar. Each of the slides will have live links that are going to have more detailed explanations if you're interested. But before I begin the presentation, I do want to outline the main points that you'll learn from today's presentation. The first is going to be the benefits of having an enhanced tribal card, which I'll reference throughout as an ETC. The differences between the Real ID and the Enhanced Tribal Card Program, the multiple types of agreements with the Department of Homeland Security and Customs Border Protection, which throughout the presentation will be referenced as DHS CBP, the program policy and technical requirements for the program, and the current partnerships that PYT has established and maintained at the federal level, and also the specialized expertise that we offer, along with the development and implementation of your future ETC program. Sorry about that. Let's see. Okay, so to start off, I want to provide a little bit of history about our tribe. In 1978, we were federally recognized, but we've always been a nomadic tribe for centuries prior to that. And travel along the entire northern continent has been the key and survival to our history. And with 21,000 enrolled members on the United States side and another 40,000 who live on the Mexico side, but are not enrolled because of citizenship requirements, the development of an ETC in 2010 for the PYT tribe was of high importance. 3 years after the implementation of our program, we had the first opportunity to extend our ETC services, known as Sacred Path, to other federally recognized tribes. And also, in addition to our ETC program and those relationships that we've developed at the federal level, it allowed us to create 2 more initiatives. This one known as the CPP program, or the Cultural Participant Program, and also the Tribal Border Alliance. Both of these initiatives, CPP and Tribal Border Alliance, they're both in response to maintaining the cultural exchange across the borders, and not just the southern border, as well as the cultural awareness and understanding of tribes and their specific customs. The Alliance developed a proposal last year at the first summit in 2019 to outline recommendations on how to address the indigenous border crossings and the need for further funding. If you're interested in learning how to become a member of the Alliance, feel free to visit the website www.tribalborderalliance.com. So as I mentioned, in 2013, the tribe had the first opportunity to develop an outsourcing production system for the Heidelberg Cooperation Tribe of Alaska. And since then, we've been able to assist 7 more tribes throughout the country with their own ETC program. And that ETC program provides a turnkey solution that includes items such as a custom card design, consultation with DHS CBP, on-site trainings, and a license to our application. But what's the background and history behind the program? So after 9/11 and the terrorist attacks, the federal government realized that there was a need to provide improved recommendations for IDs that would denote the person's identity and their citizenship to keep protecting the nation's borders. So a plan was developed by the 9/11 Commission under the Secretary of Homeland Security that will later be known as the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, or WHITI. But before this final rule was enacted, there was a brief comment period, and the federal government asked tribes to participate in a government-to-government consultation on how this rule would affect them. So then on June 1st, 2009, after that government-to-government consultation, the WHITI rule was enacted, and what it states is that when entering the United States from Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, and the Bermuda by land and sea, also including by ferries, that travelers will be required to present a valid passport or another WHITI compliant document that would denote their identity and their citizenship status. You may be asking, what are those WHITI compliant documents? But later on in the presentation, I'll show a side-by-side review of what acceptable documents are allowed under that law for you to review. So there's a few requirements and agreements that need to be in place when implementing an enhanced tribal card program. The first of those agreements is called a Memorandum of Agreement, or a MOA, and that's between the tribe itself and DHS CBP. And in this MOA, tribes can negotiate which documents they're going to choose to accept from their enrolled members when they decide to issue an ETC card. The next of the 2 agreements are referenced as an ISA, or an Interconnection Security Agreement, and a Service Level Agreement, an SLA. The latter of those 2 documents, SLA, it will depend on what type of model of data exchange that the tribe chooses to implement. And there's 2 of those models. But PYT and its clients have all chose the push model. And that push model is simply this. First, the ETC is produced and securely encoded onto an RFID chip, which I will later illustrate in the presentation what that chip looks like and that technology. Second, through a secured private network, a VPN, the produced card is sent to DHS CBP, and then that information is safely stored on a database in a string of 1s and 0s, and it's all encrypted at this point. After that, I apologize. After that, DHS will then send a receipt reply back to the tribe. And then when the card is being used to cross the border, that's when the card will be read using the RFID chip within. The pull model varies and a little bit different. So when a member presents an ETC card at a port of entry, what happens is DHS will have to ping a request back to the tribe to verify the identity of that member. But that requires 24/7 access monitoring from your tribe, along with continued IT support to answer those ping requests at unknown times of day and crossings. After you're in production and you've chosen your model and you have all your agreements in place, an evaluation will be conducted by the Department of Homeland Security. And that's really just to ensure compliance with the program. And following that, then they'll post in the publication of the Federal Register a post that will verify the identity of your ETC card as an approved WITI compliant document. So really what that means is your ETC card will be a federally recognized ID that is equivalent to a US passport card. Also, a part of the program, you'll have to ensure that you have some physical securities and safeguards in place in the area where your ETC process will be occurring. These are just some of the recommendations that we recommend to our client tribes based off the type of system that they choose. And Sacred Path has invested in security controls like FBI background checks for all employees involved in the program, a fire suppression system, and 24/7 surveillance monitoring for the area where we safely secure our client's ETC card stock. Okay, so now that you understand the 3 agreements that need to be in place before implementing a program, some of the physical safeguards and controls you need, the MOA in addition does require that there are specific policies and procedures that need to be written that also are in compliance with the program. And these are a list of recommended policies per the MOA. You'll notice the first of the recommendations is an employee background check. I just want to point out a common misconception when we hear the word background checks. And it's background checks that are done on the employees and not the member applying, because DHS wants to ensure that they have the background check on the employee who's vetting and issuing an ETC card. That would also include any IT staff who could have the ability to alter information. In addition to that background check policy needing to be in place, you'll also have the ability, for example, to have real-time updates to change the status on an ETC if, for example, a breach occurs or any fraudulent activity is detected after an ETC is issued to one of your members. This slide here shows the steps for when you issue an ETC. That intake process between your tribe and the member can take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. The Memorandum of Agreements, or the MOA, does outline the requirements of what your application should include when you begin the ETC process. But the first of the requirements would be an application, somehow to capture a photo and a signature from your member, and also the ability to verify the original source documents that are provided by your member. And those skills are taught during the annual trainings by DHS CBP on how to identify fraudulent documents. This slide here talks about the actual production of the card. So the previous slide was the intake process, but this is the production. Sacred Path offers 2 different types of systems. A tribe can operate one of 2 systems. On the left, you have a full on-site ETC system, and on the right, you have what's described as an outsourcing production system. The photos in this slide, they illustrate the production equipment required for a full system, and that's where your members can walk out the same day with the printed and encoded ETC card. It does require that your tribe would have a workstation to capture the member's photo, again, their signature. You would need a card printer. You would need an RFID encoder, which is a radio frequency identification encoder that writes the information to the chip. And then you would also need your own direct VPN or virtual private network to send those requests to DHS CBP, as explained in the push model. The second option that is offered is called the outsourcing card production system. And this is a shared responsibility that's between Sacred Path and the client tribe. This process would be, first, the tribe would intake and complete the application process for their member. They would capture all the data for their member, and then they would send that request to Sacred Path. And then on behalf of the client tribe, we would print the request, we would encode the data onto the RFID chip, and then we would transmit that request to DHS through our secured VPN. And then we return the produced card back to the tribe to issue to their member. Sacred Path since 2013 has offered both of these types of systems, but majority of our clients have chosen to go with the outsourcing production system. In the Federal Register, for each of the outsourcing clients that we have, it states that Pascua Yaqui Tribe is the information technology coordinator and manufacturer of tribal cards on behalf of each of those tribes. And then this is an example of how Pascua Yaqui currently operates our own program, from the administrative side on the left and the technical side on the right. But each ETC program for a tribe is unique, and depending on the need and interest of your members, that will determine the required staff that you'll need to operate this kind of program. For example, one of our clients, they are very small, but they only work by appointments, and they only have one admin staff and one IT staff, and that serves the needs of their members. Okay, so after all those agreements were signed, all the policy and procedures are written, after PYT surpassed the learning curve for a program that didn't exist back in 2010, PYT was able to produce the first enhanced tribal ID card in August of 2010. And some of the benefits for the Pascua Yaqui tribe and other tribes have been having an ETC is that, first and foremost, it's a secure form of tribal identification card. It's also equivalent to a US passport card, and it reads the same way with the same technology. Our card contains 5 embedded security features, not all that are visible to the naked eye. It's also machine readable. Our ETC card is accepted for domestic air travel and also passage across the US borders by land and sea. And it's also accepted for the TSA pre-screen program when you want to enroll into that program. Okay, so now that I've touched on the administrative part of the program, what's the technology that I've referenced a few times within the card, and how is it read and how is it protected? This here is an example of that RFID antenna that's embedded within the ETC card. It's important to note that only approved vendors from DHS are authorized to sell the cardstock that contains this facilitative technology. But this antenna is where the cardholder data is securely encoded during that issuance process that I've explained, and it's stored there until DHS unlocks it. I also want to point out that there is no tribal data. There's no blood quantum, there's no lineage, there's none information like that that is embedded onto the card. And only when the members are driving across the port of entry, as illustrated in this photo, only then is when the information will be accessed by DHS. So your information is safe if you're walking around with your card in your wallet. Okay. As you see in the example of Heidelberg's ETC, the information that's printed on the ETC card, it's the same information that your members will provide their local DMV when they apply for a license. But the back of the card on the bottom is unique, and this is where tribes can see more benefits of implementing an ETC card for their members. You'll notice the area above the red box. That area is really up to the tribe on what they want to have printed. The possibilities like Heidelberg could include printing a band or a clan name, maybe possibly adding an IHS or Veteran Affairs number. You can also print your enrollment numbers, and that information is not shared with DHS, only printed. And in this example too, we have the optional 2D barcode that has the fingerprint scan. The area in the red box, that's the second way in addition to the RFID antenna that the ETC card is read. It's known as an MRZ, or a machine readable zone. This right here is just a string of letters, numbers, and symbols that allows for readers at the port to swipe your card to read your ETC when members walk across the port versus driving, like I showed in the last photo. But what about the design of the card? And how do you prevent from the outside possibly counterfeiting your ETC? These are just some examples of the core concept designs to consider when you're designing an ETC card, along with what the background of the card will look like. Our expert card design team works one-on-one with the card manufacturer to incorporate the most up-to-date embedded security features. ETC card design is more than just, buying a printer that can print the common hologram onto your card. It's really a complex process of layering each unique feature into the card while creating overlapping elements that heightens the overall security of your card. DHS requires that tribes work with a specific list of card manufacturers who are familiar with this layering process and who have also met all the technical specifications that are acceptable to DHS. Your ETC card during this design process is pre-printed with all the layered security features along with inventory control numbers even prior to the application process. The only information that's printed during the production process are the demographics like your member's name, their photo, and a physical description. These are just some more examples of some of the common security features that Sacred Path helps incorporate into tribes' ETC card designs. When we work with the tribe during their design process, we work closely with them and we gather text and images that are important to the tribe. And then using some of those examples that they provide, we create an embedded security feature into the card. Tribes can ask us during this process, well, how much is the ETC program? But it's really important to consider this process and ask yourself, how many features do I want to incorporate into my card? How secure do I want my card to be? Things like your size of your features, the placement of the feature, the color formulations, which of these features, and how much card stock you'll be purchasing at the end of the day, that really determines the investment and the requirement into the program. After the card design is created, our expert card design team and Sacred Path will perform an on-site press proof, which you see here in this photo. And really what that's for is just to ensure that precise alignment and use of color formulations are on the ETC card prior to printing. And during this time is when the ETC files are exchanged and the manufacturer can provide an exact amount of how much each card will cost with the selected features. If a card's quoted by the card manufacturer outside of your desired budget, what the designer will do is he'll circle back with the tribe before getting any approval to print. He'll narrow down the cost and he'll really reevaluate your design, all while making sure that the integrity of the card with the features is still there. These are some examples of ETC cards that we've designed for client tribes. DHS only requires that a tribe incorporates a minimum of 2 security features, but Sacred Path and all of their clients have no less than 5 security features, including the cards you see. We've worked closely with each one of these tribes to create a card that is unique to them. Okay. So now that we've talked about the ETC and the witty law behind it, what about Real ID and how does it tie into ETCs? We get asked the question, how does Real ID affect tribes? How do I make my tribal ID Real ID compliant? So let's first talk about briefly the history behind Real ID. That same 9/11 commission that I spoke about in the beginning, who enacted and wrote the law behind WITI, that same commission is the same commission that outlined recommendations for states when issuing identification cards such as driver's license. So starting October 2021, all travelers flying domestically will need to present a Real ID or another WITI compliant document. The Real ID was not written to include federally recognized tribes. This is where in the beginning I mentioned that comment period that came into play. The federal government allowed for tribes to develop a tribal ID that would mirror these recommendations, which is now known as the Enhanced Tribal Card Program, only available to federally recognized tribes. For the sake of time, I won't play this video link, but it'll be provided in the slides if you're interested. But from the news reports, we know that states were not ready for the Real ID Act when it was originally scheduled for October of 2020, less than 6 months from now. But because of COVID, DHS allowed for another 1-year extension for Real ID. Something to think about, PYT and many tribes have elderly members who were born at home, and they don't have the traditional birth documents that you get from a hospital, like a birth certificate. As mentioned with the MOA, your tribe can negotiate what documents will be accepted. And this is what the Pascua Yaqui Tribe did. We negotiated under our memorandum of agreement to accept church baptismal documents in lieu of birth documents. So we're able to issue a travel document to our members who wouldn't qualify at the Department of State for a passport book or a Real ID. This was a huge benefit to our tribe to be able to have an ETC for those members. It's also a time saving and a cost benefit to our members than them having to go to the DMV and make an appointment. They can just come to our department rather than wait hours in line. This is a list of acceptable documents under Real ID and WITI, depending on what type of travel you're planning on doing. So throughout the presentation, you may have asked, is our tribal ID enhanced and is our Real ID ready? Under this list of Real ID documents on the left, about halfway down, in red, you'll see the words "a federally recognized tribal issue photo ID is an accepted form for travel, for domestic travel only within the United States." And on the right, under WITI, the type of acceptable documents for a US citizen to present when they're traveling either domestically or internationally by land or sea is an enhanced tribal card or an American Indian card, which is no longer offered. So what I've done here is make a comparison grid of those acceptable documents and their requirements and uses of each of those IDs. A careful comparison of this grid at a later time can help you decide if an enhanced travel card could be more beneficial of an ID for your tribe. Just for example, I want to compare an ETC card and a tribal ID when you're trying to outweigh the benefits. So in this grid here, you would go to the travel column on the left in gray, and under enhanced tribal card, you'll see that you can use that card for international travel to the areas described. And because it's WITI compliant, you can also use it for domestic travel too. Your members wouldn't need to go and get an EDL if you already offer an ETC card to them. But if you want to use your current tribal ID in its current state, according to TSA, yes, you can use it for domestic air travel, but it needs to have a photo. It needs to be tamper resistant. It has to have a security feature described like in the slide 16, and it can't be over 1 year expired, and you may be subject to additional verification by TSA at the checkpoints. So with all that in mind, would your ID pass that verification test today? So what I did is I personally tested myself to understand what does additional verification mean. I'm from Arizona, and during one of my many travels at a Texas airport, I decided to use my Pascua Yaqui tribal ID, not my ETC card, but my regular tribal ID. And first of all, the agent, he wasn't even familiar with what tribe I belonged to. He stated that he couldn't accept my ID. I was forced to step out of line, and I had to wait for a supervisor to come review my ID. Unfortunately, TSA has such a high turnover rate, and training on all 500 plus tribal IDs can't always be provided. So I had to continue and reason with them why my tribe was a federally recognized tribe and that they had to accept my ID. A lot of our PYT members only have their tribal ID cards as their only form of identification, especially the elders. And this is going to hinder their travel if they attempt to travel. But I also want to note too why TSA is being so strict. They just want to verify the identity and prevent any future attacks like 9/11. So as I conclude this presentation, I want to ask you to take a look at your tribal ID right now and ask yourself a few questions. Ask yourself, how will this new ID requirement, WITI and Real ID, impact my tribe? Are you and your tribal members aware of the new ID requirements and upcoming changes to travel? And given the current documentation requirements right now and fees to acquire a real ID, will your members be able to provide all of that? And how secure is your tribal ID right now? Can someone easily duplicate your ID? Does it have one or more security tamper-resistant features? And are there measures to protect your ID against fraud? And also, is your tribal membership protected against theft, and are your services and assets safeguarded? What I mean by that is if your ID is misplaced and someone who's not enrolled fraudulently uses your member's card for things such as dental, health, and schooling, are there measures in place to protect against that? And if you did implement your own ETC program for your tribe, can your tribal members help offset some of the costs? Some of the tribes that we've assisted right now, they chose to charge a small fee for their ETCs to help recoup some of those investment costs. Drina, thank you, and to the entire team for taking the time to listen to this webinar. I'm gonna hand back the control to Drina for Q&As.
Thank you, Shanti and Stephanie, so much for that presentation. At this time, we'll respond to questions that were written in the chat. And the first one, Shanti, is from Winona Wallace, and she asked that you expound on how the ETC is equivalent to a passport and how do international countries accept the ETC when going to Iceland, Germany, France, etc.
Hi, Winona, thank you for that question. That's a really great question. We get asked that quite often. But because the ETC is equivalent to a US passport card because of that facilitative technology. So anyone who may have a US passport card and not the book, if you notice the back of the card, it does at the bottom have an MRZ, which is the machine readable zone I spoke about. And it also contains that RFID chip, that RFID technology embedded inside of the card. And that's the same technology that the ETC card uses. And that's why it's equivalent, I apologize, in addition to the publication in the Federal Register, denoting it as a WITI compliant document. The second part of your question is how do international countries accept it? WITI only states that it's good for the Western Hemisphere. So the only countries that will accept and your ETC card would be Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Bermudas. It works just like a passport card. So if you have a US passport card from the United States government, those are the only places where you can use that passport card. If you want to travel to the countries like you named, Iceland, Germany, and France, you still do need the passport book because it requires that you have a stamp by US Customs. I apologize, by their Customs Department.
Thank you. Our next question is, do you help provide draft language for the Memorandum of Agreement?
We can provide a template memorandum. I do have a copy of that. Anybody interested? Our contact information is in the last slide, and please feel free to reach out to me. I can provide you not only the template for that, I can provide you the contact of who you would be in negotiations with when you decide to implement your own program.
We will have this webinar available on YouTube probably within a week or two. And then we also have an evaluation for you folks for today's webinar. It's listed in the chat, so please download that and do an evaluation of the webinar. Go ahead, Charles.
We have more questions.
Okay,
can you work with other tribes that are headquartered, or is the main lead for other bands and tribe groups in other countries? For example, a Canadian tribe that is the main governing group for all tribes is in Canada and the US state. So for example, the tribe that you're with has tribal citizens on the US side and the Mexico side. Can you explain that a little further?
Hello, my name is Maricela Nunez. I'm the Sacred Path Tribal Enrollment Director for the Pascua Yaqui Tribe, and Shanti, we're all part of the team. And I can respond to that question. One example, the Kickapoo Traditional Tribe of Texas, they hold what's called the American Indian Card. Unfortunately, BIA issues that card. Well, issued initially the card, however, it is no longer available. So they have dual citizenship. So they have citizenship, tribal members who are considered Mexican citizenship, but are also members of the tribe. So they qualify for an ETC. On our northern border, we have various tribes who also hold dual citizenship with Canada. However, the tribe is federally recognized and located, their reservation, although their border may cross their tribal lands, their federally recognized tribes reside on the US side. So when those tribal members apply for an ETC, they at that point will declare a citizenship status. So depending on that, they will print a US flag or a Canadian flag on their ETC. So that's how those are, in terms of citizenship, are identified. That is also negotiated, those terms in regards to citizenship status is negotiated in the Memorandum of Agreement with DHS. They do allow Canadian citizens to obtain an ETC so long as they are members of the federally recognized tribe. We've done some work with Blackfoot Nation, communication visits, and we're learning a little more about the confederacies. So Blackfoot has a tribe in Montana, however, their confederacy tribes cross the border. So we're in the process of learning a little more whether they would be eligible for the ETC.
Thank you. Our next question is, I don't understand how we never had borders as tribal person. So since the attacks on the US, did that change that for all of us?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the question is I don't understand how we never had borders as tribal persons. So since the attack on the US, did that change for all of us? And I believe this year only is with regards to Whitty.
Mm-hmm. And that's why Pascua Yaqui took the lead in the initiative of Tribal Border Alliance, so that we can address the indigenous crossing rights and the mobility of indigenous people. And that's why we encourage other tribes to participate. Shanti did touch on that a bit, but there was an actual proposal drafted in 2019, basically an ask of the federal government for the government to government consultation. So we hope to make more progress because you're right, the borders crossed us, in terms of mobility, and those are inherited rights. However, because we are living in different times now, and because of 9/11, securing our nation's border has really become the nation's priority. But at the same time, this access should not negatively, these new requirements should not impact our people. We should still, to this day, be able to move freely, just like we always have.
Thank you. Is there an annual conference to learn more about ETC? Will there be one this year, even with the coronavirus present, perhaps a virtual conference?
So we, on a yearly basis, we normally host an annual training for those tribes that have a memorandum in place. And then we have informational sessions. We're assessing that right now, and we're looking at possibly rescheduling for early next year or later this year, depending on, the developments with COVID, how that's going. But we are now doing the webinars. Shanti and Stephanie are reaching out virtually to provide this information. But we hope to resume the conferences by at least early next year.
Thank you. Our next question is, we are in the process of looking for new card printer and we have been waiting. We are in Oregon and they're looking for assistance in a template to be able to print out their own cards. Is this something that your tribe could help them with? If so, how can they get a quote for service?
So I guess my question would be to this individual is, are they interested in an ETC card or just a regular tribal ID card? So that would have to be determined first. Any regular, for example, Fargo desktop printer can print a card, but the embedded security features are all pre-printed by the card manufacturer.
They're saying they have regular cards. Is there a specific contact person that you would like them to reach out to specifically while we have your contact information up that may be better for them to reach out to?
Yeah, Shanti would be, feel free to reach out to Shanti. We can have a further discussion on that.
There you go. Our next question is, are there representatives for assistance, inquiries, or trainings by state, or do we all use these 4 contacts that are provided?
As Maricela just mentioned, anybody who wants more information, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll give you as much as I can regarding the Sacred Path program. But if you're looking to inquire with DHS directly, I can also provide that information along with the template MOA, and I can provide a starting point if you choose to implement your own ETC program. I'd be happy to help out with that.
Just to add, we also, when we host these events, conferences, you know, the training, the informational sessions, we will always have DHS representatives on site. So they pretty much do, they'll go over the technical side of, you know, the journey through the program, and they will always make themselves available. And we also worked very closely with our tribal liaison at Customs Border Protection to develop the training material. So that's how we've been able to bring this to other tribes and us being the host of that.
If a tribe were to decide to sign up for a tribal ID service with the ETC, is there an annual or monthly maintenance fee associated?
What we do now is for tribes that are interested, we would provide an example scope of work and a cost estimate so they have an idea of what the program would entail. All of that would provide all associated costs.
Okay. Is this allowable on Kerrs Act funds, and where can we purchase this equipment?
So in terms of the Kerrs Act, I would have to refer to the tribe. I know in applying for this fund, there's a criteria that needs to be met. I personally had a conversation with the tribe in regards to receiving Kerrs Act funding, and the way they're going to be utilizing it is the relief funding services in terms of COVID response, we need to ensure is going to our tribal members. One way to verify our tribal members is their identity, and this is through a secure document like an ETC. So they're using it that way. In terms of equipment, in our scope and our cost estimate, we specifically outline equipment. We need an NDA at first to outline the specific peripherals and description of each equipment, but that's all included in the cost estimate.
Okay, and how would it work for other tribal members who do not reside in our village but elsewhere around the US? How would they be able to, say, get the card if they were able to obtain this card for their members?
So I'll use us as an example. We have about 1,500 Pascua Yaqui tribal members that reside in the state of California. So what we do on a yearly basis is we do outreach services. So this is something that Sacred Path can also help with. Basically, it's travel equipment. You go on site, you capture your information, come back home, and produce the cards. So that's one of the great things about the program is you are able to extend it to your other tribal communities. We're located in Tucson, Arizona, and we have our largest community off the reservation is in Guadalupe, which is close to Phoenix. We have about 3,500 members. Our satellite office there operates similar to an outsourcing card production system. So we can definitely offer those types of systems as well to extend the services.
We have a question of, can you repeat your answer regarding ETC allowability of the Kerrs Act?
So, like I mentioned, having a conversation with another tribe, they were going to utilize that funding to implement ETC to ensure that tribal members that are receiving any type of services as a result of the funding were going to be verified by these credentials. They're tribal members, and these are secure documents that we're issuing to our tribal members. And then in return, eligible for the services. A lot of Kerrs Act funding, I know, like for example, our tribe, we recently hired a COVID relief fund funding administrator. So they would have more knowledge in terms of the allowable expenses with the funding. So I would refer to your tribal administration people, your grants and contract people for more guidance on that.
And we have another question. This will be our last question for the webinar. Our enrollment database is currently managed with Progeny software. Is this something that you are familiar with? Are you guys familiar with other softwares that can be incorporated into your systems?
Yes, we have the ability to accommodate an interface. So we are working with some client tribes that currently use Progeny, and we basically develop an interface that will export into the ETC system. But all of that will be further explained in terms of the technical requirements during our preliminary discussions.
Thank you. I have entered a link. This is a link to the evaluation of today's webinar, and I will turn it back over to Trina.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, ladies, for your information and your expertise. I'm hoping this is something that all tribes take advantage of because it sounds like a really good idea. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and come back to our Alaska Region TTA Center website in about a week, or actually I think it'll be up on the ANA website for a recording of this webinar for more information. And then of course the contact information for the Pascua Yaqui team is in front of you. And please do take advantage of the evaluation. We'd like to hear back from you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.